Hey, welcome back to the Bondfire podcast. Tonight's episode is the Boys podcast.
Yes!
We're going to answer questions. We're probably going to sing some songs. It's just a boys podcast. And we're at some point, we'll dive into some scripture. And we'll see you inside there.
I've only been here for about 2 minutes and I've already ruined the show.
No, you did not ruin the show. I was so deathly sick this weekend, man.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling it. But I feel a little bit better than dude, it was bad this weekend.
What were you coming down with? What was it?
Just itchy throat, nose, all of it, fever. But dude, I was taking some Dayquil and realized that it was not working.
Was it NyQuil?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't do the NyQuil because I do the Benadryl.
I was taking Dayquil and I found out it was NyQuil. I was sleeping all day.
Are you taking it at night?
Well, it was Dayquil because I don't want to be drowsy during the day. So I was doing the Dayquil and I realized that it was not working. So I switched to the Robitussin.
Yeah.
You know the Robitussin?
Yeah.
Dude, that thing knocked me out.
Robitussin is disgusting, but it works.
It's better than the Dayquil.
I remember as a kid, like there was always that balance between wanting to get out of school and pretend to be sick, or like even if I was sick, kind of play it up a little bit. But I always knew if I was sick, I was going to get the Robitussin treatment from mom. And so it was like, what do I want least, to go to school or Robitussin? It was like I would have to weigh those things. I usually opted for the Robitussin. It was better.
Dude, it did wonders, dude.
Yeah.
I'm on the Robitussin train now.
Yeah.
You want an intro?
I would love to be introduced. Because right now it feels like I'm at a party and you just brought me, but you like haven't. You're like, I'm just there.
He's like, this is my friend.
It's kind of like I felt whenever I was seeing, because over the weekend I went and saw Bridget, my girlfriend, who's in touring, and she's been on this tour with these people for the last 4 weeks, and they're all like a family now. And then I was just in their dressing room yesterday, and she was so busy that she just didn't introduce me to anybody. And so every single person on this tour just looked at me in the dressing room, and they were just like,
"Is that Shabuzi?"
Yeah, I was not Shabuzi. I'm not. I'll never be Shabuzi, no matter how bad I want to be. But
oh my gosh,
that's how I feel on this podcast right now. Just like,
well, I'll give you
hello.
a proper introduction. If you guys are just now tuning into the Bonfire Pod stuff, this is producer Brooks over here. His official name is Brooks Huntley. He's not only one of the most talented musicians that I know, but he's also a producer for this show. He helps book all the guests, and he's just a good dude, a good friend. So I think he's going to be joining us for the next few conversations and just kind of see how it goes. And I'm excited to have him with us. And you guys know producer Nick as well behind the camera. He's just as cool.
Enjoying some Euros.
Some Euros. Couldn't do it this show without these guys. So excited to have Brooks. And there's your little introduction, man.
Thanks, dude.
Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man. So we met at a place called Bobby's Idle Hour here in Nashville through a mutual producer friend of ours who's produced both of our stuff before. Andrew King, incredible guy.
Yep.
And he'd been hyping you up a lot before I actually met you. And he was just
really
telling me, yeah, like he hyped you up a lot. He was like, there's this guy, Matt, he just moved to town. I know him through Skylar Taylor, shout out, who produced a lot of your early music. And Skylar works with Andrew really closely, and I just know them really well. And so I took his opinion with more than a grain of salt. I was like, I'm sure Matt's a good dude. And I met you. I wasn't sure what to think about you at first. We started talking, and I was like, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what his vibe is. I heard you were a TikToker. I'm negatively biased to TikTokers. You know, I'm like, I'm not gonna like you if you're a TikToker. That's wrong. Don't judge. It's in the Bible. But I started chatting with you. It was awesome. And I immediately guessed, you were like, I met this girl I have a crush on. I immediately guessed who it was.
No, dude.
You remember that?
I remember that.
Yeah.
I also, wasn't your mom there that night?
My mom was there. Yeah, Linda.
Wasn't Bridget there too?
I don't think she was. She might have been.
I think Bridget was there because I thought she was your sister.
We look nothing alike.
No, I thought she was your sister for
Bridget
sure.
Bridget has brown hair and like olive skin, and I am this. So, shows you how good Matt is at predicting siblings or couple. We should play siblings or couple on the show sometime.
My new roommate, Matt, his girlfriend, they look just alike.
Yeah.
Like they literally could be brother and sister.
But yeah, we met and we were hanging out,
Yeah.
and then we just started, I think through the baseball or whatever, went on our hike around Lake Radnor, and I was like, oh, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
We were talking about NFTs and
NFTs.
the future of music and all that. And I was like, all right, this guy's smart. He knows what he's doing. And then I started my men's group, so to speak, which is originally 530 boys. We would meet. It was a confusing thing. I was like, I'm going to start I wanted a place where a bunch of guys could hang out, and asked if anybody wanted to be a part of it. You were like, let's do it. We were going to meet every single Friday or whatever.
Yeah.
Even though it was 530 boys, it was for a stupid reason. I called it that. And then I was like, actually, it should probably be called 800 boys because we meet at 8 a.m. And now it's 900 boys because we meet at 9 a.m. on Saturdays. It's just, and I think like one guy shows up every week, but we still do it, you know? I'm going to be there at my house at 9 a.m. every Saturday.
I haven't been to a Saturday yet, but I'll be there.
We'll
I was going to go this past week, and then you said you canceled it.
I did, yeah.
But it's all good. Honestly, I kind of do miss the Fridays.
Yeah.
But it's hard for you, isn't it?
Well, it's hard for a couple of the other guys, too.
Other guys, too.
Me and Matt don't have jobs. We're basically unemployed.
That's been unemployed for a long time. Yeah,
so
it's sad.
We're like, let's meet at 8 a.m. on Fridays. And every other guy's like, I have a job. Which you forget about when you live in Nashville.
Yeah, that's true. Saturdays probably do work better for the guys.
But we became better and better friends. And I remember in that men's group, and it's how I became a part of this podcast.
Yeah.
I was... we would do this thing. We would share kind of whatever was going on in our lives, a point of stress or whatever.
Yeah.
If you had anything you needed to kind of get off your chest. And my share that week was just money. It was stressing out. The way that I've been making money as a musician for the last few years kind of dried up. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to still have the time to make my music, but I didn't know what was going to kind of supplement some of that income I was losing out on. And I was just talking about that. And I think like few days after that, you're like, dude, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but I'm starting this podcast and I need somebody to help me out. Yeah. It's not a ton of money, but it's some money and it can probably help. And it was kind of this amazing moment for me.
Yeah.
Where everything, like the stars aligned. It was exactly what I needed to where it was, something that I could be passionate about, something I could believe in. I loved your vision behind doing the podcast. It was a little bit of dependable income and it was with people that I liked.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the perfect situation for me to be in. Plus, I've always wanted to be a podcaster, but I've actually never known how to get into it. So my thinking going into this was like, this is going to be a cool way to learn. I'm going to learn a bunch. I'm going to figure out how this works. And I have. And I had this little thing in the back of my mind. I was like, maybe if I'm funny enough behind the scenes, he'll let me be on the show every once in a while. And now here we are, and I'm auditioning for the show.
You auditioned for it, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, no, that was a huge blessing, man. Because also, like, I was in the midst, because I had first found Nick through Indeed. I was like, dude, I got on Indeed. I got on, like, all the job apps. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I need people to help me. Found Nick. I was like, okay, I got my video guy. I was searching weeks and weeks. I'm like, who can I find for like a booking person? And there was like, nobody was applying to this thing. Like nobody. I think I had like maybe 2 applicants. And
really?
They were just not very qualified for the job. And so it just like kind of came at perfect timing too. I was like, we're boys. And I was like, dude, this is literally perfect. Like exactly the person that I would want.
Yeah. Goes to show you relationships are important because I might be the most unqualified person you could have possibly hired for the job.
Dude, I don't even know why I'm hosting this show right now. I am so unqualified to do any of this, dude.
Yeah. But that's what makes it real. That's what I like about doing this every week.
And that's the gospel. I mean, just kidding. It's true, though. Yeah. Broken people coming
I can think of almost everybody that did anything significant in the scriptures was unqualified, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true, man. That's true.
Definitely a common theme throughout the scriptures. I think it's good to remember, Yeah. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, especially in a town like Nashville.
Yeah.
And I've certainly run into that my whole life. And I still run into it all the time, but I think you do see the Lord's faithfulness over time and just realizing that the adventure of being underqualified for something and diving into it anyway and trusting in his provision to kind of take you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
You see that enough times throughout your life and it just starts to make it click. And I think that's what wisdom is. You get older and you've been through it. You've seen things. You've done things a couple times. You've watched things work out when they shouldn't have. And just over time, like the Lord will show you with his works, with his actions in your life, how faithful he is. And this is just another one of those things for me where, I mean, I literally did not know what I was going to do to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And then this came about and kind of changed everything for me. I was looking at bartending jobs again, which was something I really didn't want to do.
Coffee. Weren't you going to do like barista stuff? Yeah. Dude, it's a blessing, man. And the Lord works in awesome ways. Sorry, my mic keeps falling.
Yep. But I guess, you know, to answer the question, who am I? Because you asked me that, I think. I'm a musician. I'm a believer and a friend of Matt and Nick's, and been in Nashville making music for the last 6 years, but been making music since I was 11. I was playing on 6th Street bars in Austin, Texas, where I was raised when I was 11 years old, gigging and doing that whole thing. Very, very brief child acting career in the middle of all that. But mostly a musician, and that's what I've been doing my whole life and continuing to do here. And then just trying to say yes to anything that pops onto my radar that feels special, and being a part of this felt special.
It's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad both of you guys are here, man.
Yeah.
I tell you guys all the time, but it's just such a blessing, dude.
Yeah.
Like you said in there, man, just every week when I come here, dude, it's just feels right. Feels right. So
I'm going to shift into my interview mode, and I'm going to interview you a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Do it. Also, should we add some wood? Or are we good? I can't see it from my side. Is it good?
Yeah. It looks all right.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good enough.
Hit me.
So I know this is all a work in progress now.
Yeah.
And I know your vision behind what we're doing here is evolving and changing over time. And what I admire the most about what you did with this, and it's one of the main reasons I wanted to be a part of it, was just almost like the childlike audacity to just be like, I'm going to full send this even before I really know exactly what it's supposed to be. But I'm going to commit to it with everything that I have. And you've shown that. You've put your money behind this. You've put your time and your energy behind this. You've put everything that you have into this podcast. And you just did it. And you didn't think twice about it. And I respected that so much. Yeah. I was inspired by it. I was gleaning off of that from the second that you told me about this and how you were approaching it. Yeah. Now that we're looking at how we're going to start changing, shifting gears and figuring out what that is, as it stands right now, what do you feel like your vision behind this podcast? And I would, to make that question more specific, your vision behind what you want this podcast to accomplish in the lives of the people that are listening to it.
Oh, good.
Where do you feel like you're at with that now?
Yeah. Good question. I think, just like full transparency, I think the mission has not changed. Mm-hmm. Like, this podcast to exist, we have the mission statement here, and I think mission statements can change, but for the most part, it's been pretty straightforward, and it was to influence people through influential people in order that they may know God and influence people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's still true to this day. That mission has not changed. The way that it goes about and the strategy of how do we do that and how do we teach that to these listeners, I think that needs to take a shift. I know that we talked about like different guest stuff and like doing more of this stuff, but really, like, my vision for the podcast, I really just want to make sure that we're staying in the Word as much as possible, because we can talk about whatever we want and we can like laugh and stuff like that, and that's awesome, and we should do that. But at the end of the day, like, if somebody's watching this, like, I want them to hear something that we read and we talk about and how they can apply it to their own life. Mm-hmm. I said this last week, and I was listening to the podcast that Nick edited, and I said this, and it kind of just spoke to me, even though I said it. It was like, I could read the Bible like 50 times in my life, and I could preach and preach every verse to you and say all the right stuff, but if I'm not applying what this is teaching in my own life, then it's absolutely useless. Yeah. So I want that to be true to the listeners who are watching this show, listening to the show. It's like, just because we're sharing testimonies and sharing verses and stuff like that, like, really just lean into what we're saying and really just try to grasp and ask the right questions. And every week we send out reflection questions and verses that we put in an email. And so grasp those questions. I would love to see a community where every Monday I send out those emails, and then every Monday night there's groups like this, like around their own bonfire, answering those questions and reading those scriptures together.
Yeah.
That I think is the main like focus for me. Like I would love to see that. And this is not like we're gonna do what we need to do on our side, and we're gonna share testimonies, and we're gonna bring on guest speakers to talk about their own stories and stuff like that. But the Lord's gonna do what He's gonna do, and I think that's like part of the reason that I was just like so quick to get into it, because it's like, I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm just kind of trusting along the way. And we had to talk, like at some point, like the money's gonna come, like run shorter, and we're gonna have to start asking like for donations and stuff like that. But I'm not even worried about that. Like I'm just fully committed to just every week we're gonna be here, and we're gonna read scripture, and we're gonna share testimonies and share what the Lord's doing in our life, and hopefully that inspires people to start their own bonfires. So that's it. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that actually is funny that you said what you just said the way you said it. I smiled a little bit when you said, you're like, the Lord's going to do what He's going to do.
Yeah.
Before we even started talking, before we even started rolling tonight, I pulled up a scripture that I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
It's tattooed on my wrist. Got 1921 right there. When people ask me about it and I'm not in the mood to get into it, I just tell them that I like military time, and 7:21 is my favorite time of day. It's probably like 7:21 right now, huh? 7:38, close enough.
There you go.
But the scripture I wanted to pull up, Proverbs 19:21. There's a different translation here. I'll read this one and then I'll say the one that I know. But I remember I got this tattooed on my wrist a few years ago. It had to have been around COVID times, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was just trying to figure out what my next move was. And I was in my early 20s and not exactly sure what my purpose here in Nashville was going to be. And knowing that I had all these big dreams and these big ideas about what I wanted my life to be, and was trying to figure out, like, do I want these things enough? Like, what is going wrong? Why are things not working out the way that I want them to work out? And I was seeking peace. And Proverbs has always been a book that I go to when I seek peace, just because it's full of like, it's almost like rap bars. Like it's just like spitting truth over and over and over again in rapid fire, which is what I love about it. It's so bite-sized. Yeah. It's just like bite-sized chunks of wisdom straight from the Lord. And I remember this one stuck out to me so much, and it still does to this day, and it's why I put it on my wrist. It says, many are the plans in the mind of man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. Huh. And the translation, I think it's probably NIV.
This is ESV.
This is, ESV right here.
Yeah.
I think NIV is the one that I've always committed to memory, and it was, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose prevails. Yeah. And I even found there's always, and I don't think it's accidental, the Proverbs will repeat itself a lot. Yeah. There's another one. I have this pair of dice tattooed here, and it's Proverbs 16:33 in reference to that. It's, you can roll the dice, but the Lord determines where they fall. Mm. And I think the reason that stood out to me so much was that it gave me this piece about the idea of like, how much influence do I have over my life versus how much sovereignty does God have over my life. That always felt like there was a tug and pull about those sorts of things. Yeah. And for me, what those two verses in tandem said to me was, like, the Lord has blessed us with this ability to live our lives and make decisions and have free will to move forward and make choices for our lives. Like rolling a pair of dice, you get to roll. You get to do that, and that's like a gift that we get to have the agency to roll the dice in our own lives. But ultimately, we have zero control where they fall. And when you accept that, like when you truly accept that, there's like an insurmountable peace that surmounts all understanding, that comes from that. And it's like, that's what this life is. It's this beautiful experience where God gave us a pair of dice, and He said, go, roll them. And I want to see the joy on your face where you see where they land. Yeah. And if you trust me, and if you don't fight me, if you don't wish that it was 2 4s instead of a 3 in a set, like 6, like, just trust that where it lands is good. And stop swimming upstream all the time against me. Like, I have plans for you. Your plans have been established. That was a piece that I needed a few years ago, and then I feel like the last probably 4 or 5 years have just been me trying to live that word, you know? And that we talk about, like, why is the scripture so important? You can read the Bible 50 times, like you said, right? Or 100, 200 times in your life. And it doesn't mean anything if you're not applying it to your lived experience. And so when you think about this, what does this really mean? That the Lord's purpose prevails. There's a million different ways that's going to apply to your life, probably a million times a day, if you're thinking about it, if you're committing those works and those words to your life. So that's funny that you went into saying it like that, because it's exactly the verse I wanted to highlight, just to kind of kick things off tonight.
I love it, dude. Part of me wants to kind of just dive into Proverbs 19.
Yeah.
Like, shall we just read it?
Just read the whole chapter?
Yeah, just read the chapter and then kind of just dissect it a little bit. Do you want to do that?
Let's do it. Why not?
I say we do it.
Let's just dive into it.
It's
not that long.
Yeah, I'll do 1 through 14.
Oh, we're going to popcorn read. Let's go.
Oh, popcorn read. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Proverbs 19, if you're listening tonight. Better is a poor person who walks in his integrity than one who is crooked in speech and is a fool. Desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way. When a man's folly brings his way to ruin, his heart rages against the Lord. Wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friend. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. Many seek the favor of a generous man, and everyone is a friend to a man who gives gifts. All a poor man's brothers hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursues them with words, but does not have them. Whoever gets sense loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will discover good. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will perish. It is not fitting for a fool to live in luxury, much less for a slave to rule over princes. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. A king's wrath is like the growling of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is continual dripping of rain. House and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Jeez.
Dude, I do want to say, this is just a sidebar. One of the things that cracks me up, like I think I've had actual full-on laugh fits before reading Proverbs, like at 5 a.m. or whatever, whenever I'm reading my Bible. There's so many verses where he just goes so hard about how, like, a quarrelsome wife, like, it'd be better to live in an attic with spikes in your feet and eyes than it would be to have a wife that is quarrelsome and starts fights all the time. I'm assuming some of these are Solomon. They're just, like, so hilariously hard with those quarrelsome wife verses.
Dude.
All right, so let's take it up with 15. Slothfulness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. Whoever keeps the commandments keeps his life. Whoever despises his ways will die. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deeds. Discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. A man of great wrath will pay the penalty, for if you deliver him, you will only have to do it again. Listen to the advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future. Many are the plans in the mind of man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. What is destined in a man's steadfast love, what is desired in a man is steadfast love, and a poor man is better than a liar. The fear of the Lord leads to life, and whoever has it rests satisfied. He will not be visited by harm. The sluggard buries his hands in the dish, and will not even bring it back to his mouth. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will learn prudence. Reprove a man of understanding, and he will gain knowledge. He who does violence to his father and chases away his mother is a son who brings shame and reproach. Cease to hear instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A worthless witness mocks at justice, and the mouths of the wicked devour iniquity. Condemnation is ready for scoffers, and beating for the backs of fools. Is that the end of it?
That's it.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like it's just like it's almost like a song line. Like
it really does. It feels like a song.
Yeah. Song, isn't it the Song of Solomon?
Well, that's a different one. The Psalms are, I feel like, Song of Solomon, I guess, is a song, right? Song of Solomon is the one in Sunday school where they're always like, okay,
yeah,
we're gonna talk about the Song of Solomon.
Yeah. That I was thinking of something else.
Remember my brother? You guys were talking about this a couple weeks ago. The picture Bibles.
Yeah.
And my brother was laughing because he's getting those for his kids now. He has.
Dude, they're awesome.
Yeah, and he was like, "There's a few that aren't included in the picture Bibles, probably for the better." And Song of Solomon not being in there is Probably a good one not to have in a children's picture Bible.
Dude, they're awesome. I grew up with those things. That's like how I remember like all those stories. I just like literally have visions of the stories in the books.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we read that, man. I mean, there's so much wisdom and stuff we could talk in that. I think going forward, like I'd love to come into like the boys podcast. Maybe with like a chapter in mind, probably like something maybe a little bit shorter and stuff. And then come in with like some reflection questions and just kind of answer those and stuff like that. The first thing that kind of popped out to me when you were reading that is, I love your verse, but the verse after it is actually, or two verses after it is really just as cool. Verse 23, the fear of the Lord leads to life, and whoever has it rests satisfied. He will not be visited by harm. When we think of like the fear of the Lord is a big thing in the Bible. Like it's repeated multiple times throughout Scripture. But the interesting thing about it, I've been taught, is that it's like it means two different things. So, in some cases, the fear of the Lord, and he's referring to this fear what I'm about to say. But one of the fears of the Lord that the Bible refers to is the more common one is like literally be in awe of the Lord, like in awe of His power. It's almost like, so I think it's in one country I know does this, but like their sons, whenever they approach their father, they literally like kneel down as like a sense of like power to their father, because of just like how not almighty, but how like reverence he is to the family. So it's in that same sense. It's like to be in fear of the Lord is to literally just be in awe of that. But there's also the fear of the Lord that is kind of outside of those who believe, and it's literally to like be in fear of like God, because the truth is that God is an all-powerful being. Like He literally has, I just voice cracked, He literally has the power to strike us down at any point. And His grace and His mercy chooses not to. I mean, that's the whole story of the gospel, right? But there is a powerful characteristic to God that we should be in fear of. And I think that fear sometimes can really lead to life, like to be in fear of God. That can sometimes lead people to want to, sorry, I'm mesmerized by this right now. Want to be in relationship with the Lord, you know?
Yeah. So my first reaction to all of that, as soon as you said that, I was just looking at this fire while you were talking, and looking at us trying to put this fire together. We've done this how many weeks in a row now, and we still don't know how to start a fire.
Literally wanting to start.
Yeah. There's people that live in the wilderness and can start one with rocks and strip wood, and we have literal dried wood and a gas lighter. We can't start a fire.
All in one spot.
Is it?
All around.
Did you put it on the side over there? It'll take some time. Yeah, I think it'll start lighting soon.
Yeah, give it that.
Oh, get him out of here.
But yeah, I think what I was going to say, that I've always been really intrigued by the concept of the fear of the Lord. And quite honestly, like it, for a lot of years, really rubbed me wrong. And I always felt like I was never studious enough to go in and really learn all the original translations and the original Hebrew.
There's a lot of
like
theology.
And diving, and I know there's a rich theology behind all of that.
Yeah.
And someday I probably will dive into it more in depth. But I always felt like maybe I was suspicious about the translations of the Bible that I was reading for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I would see words like fear, and I was always suspicious that was being used in a very particular way to influence people a certain way. And I think words carry a lot of weight, and words also change throughout time, and the way that we understand words now is very different than the way people that were writing these texts understood words culturally. And so it is important to understand the background of these words and what they meant to those people, so that you can kind of translate not just the words themselves, but the understanding of them, the meaning of them, to the way that we understand language now. But that word fear always struck me as an important one, And I didn't like it because I always felt like, is God love? Why would I be afraid? The funny thing is, actually finding love in other places of my life taught me exactly what that means. And again, like that's what God does. He reveals himself in our experiences. And you start to realize that, oh my gosh, yes, actually love and fear are very close friends. Because fear is not always that kind of fear you talked about, where it's, I'm scared you're going to harm me or hurt me. It's not that kind of fear. It's a reverence. It's a respect. And looking at this fire, the reason I brought that up is, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I said, from my perspective, kind of when I'm listening to the shows and the interviews we've done so far, it really comes down to whoever we're talking to. It's like, we're really asking at the end of the day what Jesus asked the disciples, like, who do you say I am?
Yeah.
And a fire is a lot like God, when you think about it in these terms, because a fire can consume and devour and destroy. But then also, if you respect the fire, if you put it in a controlled place and you treat it with the reverence and respect that it deserves, and a fire is being used as something that is going to edify your life, that you can cook food over, that you can commune over, you can speak around one, like all of a sudden this same thing, this thing that can cause pain, suffering, and devouring becomes a beautiful place to meet. It becomes a beautiful utility to cook food over. And so really who God is to you is what he'll be to you. And so when you think of God as this all-consuming, devouring, like you said, people that don't know the Lord, that might have this suspicion that if there is a God, he must not like me because look at my life. He must hate me. That's who God is to you when you think of him that way. And that fire is everywhere. It's all around you, and it's all consuming, and it's terrifying, and it's frightening because it can burn you. It can hurt you. But then when you start to see the Lord as, loving, kind, compassionate, patient, then you have a fire like this one, where we sit around it and it brings us together. And I really do think the Lord is a lot like that. It's like when you have that respect and that reverent, that kind of fear for him, then he becomes something that edifies you instead of terrifies you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where fear is misunderstood a lot of times when people read about the fear of the Lord. I certainly, for me, that's been my experience.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I think there's a lot of characteristics to God that we don't talk about, that are very necessary to who God is. I think the best way to put it is like, to really understand what love is, you have to understand what not love is, right? You have to to understand what good is, you have to understand what bad is, right? To understand what like sin is, you have to understand, okay, well, what is not sin, right? What is the absence of sin, right? And I think that's a very real thing when it comes to having a relationship with the Lord. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think a lot of times we try to put God in a box to be loving, kind, and merciful, right? Which he is, and he will always be that. But we forget that there is characteristic of God that is also like he's powerful, and like he's a judge. And if he wasn't a judge, then there would be no judgment for the sin, for our sin, right? Like he has to be a powerful judge in order for Jesus Christ to exist. Because if he was just love and mercy and kindness, then Jesus Christ wouldn't need to exist. Because guess what, dude? Like I'm not love and kind, and like I'm a broken dude. Like I got flaws, man. And so Jesus Christ had to come in there, in order so that when God looked at us, he wouldn't see that. He would see his perfect son, Jesus Christ, right? Because there's one ticket to heaven, and it's perfection. You have to be perfect to get into heaven. And so how do you be perfect? You believe and confess in the perfect son of Jesus Christ, so that when God looks at you, he sees his son, Jesus Christ. Somebody told me this the other day. I'm going to so butcher this, but I want to tell the story real quick. There's this YouTube video that I found. He was like this his name's Alan. Let me get it right real quick because I don't want to misquote it. If you have time and you're listening to this show, search the man on the middle cross. Wait, hold on. The man on the middle cross said, "I can come." Alistair Begg. And he like mentions, man, the story of the when Jesus died on the cross, and there was 2 thieves by him, and one of them was like ridiculing him and being like, "How could you say you're the son of God?" Like, you know, all this stuff. And the other guy was like, remember me when I remember me, Jesus. I'm gonna butcher this too, man. I should have looked this up. Remember me when I meet you in paradise, or something like that. And in that moment, he did nothing. Like, this dude was a thief, like a criminal. And Jesus says that surely, dude, I need to look it up because I'm gonna butcher it. I'm just gonna read it real quick.
Yeah, do it.
There's the fire.
It's here.
Dude, it only took 30 minutes in.
You know, once it's roaring, it's roaring.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right, Luke 23. Turn to it. This is just really cool. I just want to share this real quick, and then we'll kind of get into something else. But Luke 23. Okay, I'm going to start at 23:32. 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and one on the left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by, watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." And really cool, because that's like one of the only moments in scripture where it's like, this dude was a criminal. He did nothing right. Like, talk about like good works don't get you into heaven. Like, that is like, Jesus literally confirmed like he's going to be in him in paradise, even though this dude was a criminal. All he did was that he believed and he confessed that Jesus Christ was who he said he was. And he accepted the fact that he was not in a place to be in heaven because of how broken he was. And so anyways, the Alistair Barr, he does this video. He's like, "Man, I can't imagine what the angels in heaven said to that dude." Like, when he got there, he was probably like there, and like the lady at the front desk was like, "Sir, can I like help you?" And he was probably like, I'm here for heaven." And she like calls her supervisor, and she's like, why do you think that you're here? Like, what are you doing here?" And he just turns and he says, "The man on the middle cross said I could come." And it's just like that cool moment. It's like, man, like, that's like, that's us, dude. It's like,
Yeah.
we did
So
nothing.
you think heaven is like the DMV? They have like a bureaucrat office? And,
No.
Yeah, okay.
no, but like, man, that's us.
It's not the
dude.
pearly
like,
gates, it's the DMV downtown.
The DMV,
Yeah.
dude. The man on the middle cross said that I
Yeah.
could come, man. And it's
Well, that's the thing, dude. When we were just reading that, I've been both of those guys. You know?
wow. Yeah.
And I can think of times that I've been both of those guys. And I actually have a lot of sympathy for the other guy. That's like, you know, you're telling me this is who you are. Save me. Save yourself. Like, what are you doing? And I can understand that. I actually have a lot of sympathy for that guy. And I get it. And I I think there is something that happens. It's really hard to put your finger on whatever it is that happens in your life. But like Jesus said, in the Sermon on the Mount, lose your life and you'll find it. It really is that one of these men in this situation is fully fixated on his present experience. He's like, I'm here in the flesh and I'm suffering, and that's all I can think about right now. Can you save me from this suffering that I'm going through? And the other man has let go of that. The other man has accepted his lot as mortal. He's like, I'm dying. This is fading. I'm a withering flower. There's something more, and he had his eyes fixed on something beyond what he was going through in that moment.
Yeah.
And that was the only fundamental difference between those two men. In a weird way, both of them, like the other guy was kind of throwing a bone to Jesus a little bit, at least from his kind of limited perspective. He was like, he wanted what Jesus was saying to be true. He's like, I guarantee you when he said that, he's like, I hope you are who you say you are, because you can save me right now.
Right.
But he was asking for the wrong kind of saving.
Yeah.
And Lord knows I've asked for that kind of saving a million times.
Wow. Yeah.
Like I've been that guy, so I can't even hate on or judge that guy because I've been him, and I've been him as recently as today.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's. Yeah, man. I mean, it's every day, man. I was at this men's group Thursday, man, and we were talking about, man, it's just so true. Like, I think about like addiction stuff, and we talk about that, the boys, like just addiction and different things, man. Like, addiction just is like with you your whole life, right? And it's literally like you have to make a constant decision every day that you are not going to do that thing, and you're going to be a better man today than you were yesterday, right? And the same thing is, and I say all that to say, the same thing comes true when it comes to Christianity and living a life of purpose. Like, every day you have to decide through the grace of God to literally lay down your cross and follow Christ. Like, I have to, this dude told me the other day, he's like, man, dude, like, you have to, I try every day to drown the old me every day, but the problem is he's a really good swimmer. And it's like, dude, like, that's the truth, man. Like, you have to, and it's only the Lord's transformation. It's just like I just think of it like an open arms thing, man. It's like, I can't do this on my own, right? Like, the stuff that we talk about off camera, like just stuff we go through, man. It's like, I can't do this on my own.
Yeah.
Like, all I can do is just say, man, I just give it to you, dude. Like, I give it to you, God. Because I've tried it on my own and it doesn't work, man. The data isn't data.
Nick and I had that conversation about addiction last week, I think after the show. And we were talking, and I was just telling him, I feel like, because I grew up, a big part of my kind of raising and my initial understanding of the Gospels was this ministry back in Texas that was called Oak Ridge Disciple House. It's still functioning. It's flourishing. It's amazing. This guy, Joshua Harris, that started it, and he was a cocaine addict and, for decades, and had all sorts of issues and ruined his family and all these things, and had this moment where he tried to basically blow up his heart with cocaine in a hotel room. That was his plan. He wanted to kill himself, and amazingly didn't die. Like, he absolutely took enough to kill himself, and that was the plan. And it was not God's plan, and God was not going to let him die. And that was the catalyst moment for him to start looking to the Lord. He felt like he had an encounter with the Lord that night and kind of transformed everything, and then devoted his life to helping men that were going through addiction struggles, and started this incredible ministry where he was going and, developing relationships with district attorneys and things like that, guys that were being sentenced to prison time for drug charges or anything like that. He would get them to come out to the Oak Ridge house for 6 months instead of serving time in jail. And they would spend 6 months basically in the middle of nowhere encountering God. And
awesome.
These guys would graduate the program. And my brother actually went through the program. My brother's a pastor now. But at the time, he didn't really have an addiction problem as much as he was addicted, as he would say, to quitting. He was just a chronic quitter at everything he did and was just stuck and needed to know the Lord. So he went out and did that. And I was really young at the time. My brother's a good bit older than me. And I would go out every single Thursday night to this thing when I was 11, 12, 13 years old. And every Thursday, one of these guys would tell their testimony. And there was just a group of people that would break bread together and then listen to a testimony, and that was
Yeah.
it. And I would also lead worship. That's kind of how I started learning how to play
Wow.
music, was around those times. And I was just listening to these really heavy stories of addiction. And I was hearing addiction stories in the context of the gospel from a really, really young age. And Nick and I were talking about, like, because I was exposed to people that have dealt with addiction from such a young age, I've actually developed incredibly deep relationships with a lot of people that struggle with addiction. And I've noticed that there's this double-edged sword that you were kind of talking about, being a good swimmer, you know?
Yeah.
And so many of these people that have struggled with addiction end up being the most effective and powerful and compelling people I've ever met when they defeat their addictions, because it's really just the dark side of a gift, like this addiction, this ability to keep going and keep going and keep going, no matter how painful and excruciating the experience of being addicted is. It's actually a weird, like, dark superpower to be able to keep going and moving forward, even in all that pain and struggling and suffering. And then whenever that's redeemed, that same power is there, but it's just the flip. It's the light side of that. And you start to see these people that dealt with addiction now that have transcended and flipped that darkness on its head. And now it's the same amount of energy, but it's being used for good.
Mm.
And you see that these people end up being, like, some of the most effective and compelling people you've ever met in your entire life. And when they do something, they do it with all their hearts. And, you know, they have that never quitting thing in them. And that's one of the beautiful things about what God does, is he takes our deepest, darkest things and actually just converts them into, like, this negative to positive, like, energy transfer, where you have all of that same vigor and power that you had to serve your darkness. Now you're serving your light with it. And only God can do that. And I've been seeing that in people that I've known my whole life, and trying to apply that to my own life as well. I know I've been talking for a minute, but I feel like
No, you're good.
I
dude.
gotta say this, because it's been in the back of my mind, this whole discussion we've been having.
Yeah.
A huge part of my, I would say, return to God, really in the last, like, 3 years of my life. And I'm so excited for this, man, because we're having a man that played a huge role in this on the podcast next week. Chad Carger, who's going to be on. I'm so excited to have him. He runs an amazing ministry. I don't even know if he would call it a ministry. We'll ask him next week. But there's a thing called Porter's Call, where they offer free counseling to people in the music industry in the Nashville area, down in Franklin, Tennessee. And he'll tell us all about it next week. But
Yeah.
I was able to go visit him for several months. And he ended up referring me over to a therapist that I still see to this day, who's turned into really more of a spiritual mentor than anything to me. But I first went to go see this therapist in the middle of what I didn't know was going on. I just knew I was suffering. I just knew I was in darkness all the time, and I couldn't get out of it. And I didn't know why. And I was really angry, and I didn't know why. And I wanted to go figure it out. I felt like I had some trauma that I needed to figure out. I had huge chunks of my life, like enormous chunks of my life, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe I need to go do some trauma therapy. And so Chad referred me over to this guy. We did EMDR therapy. And I don't know if you know anything about it. It's very interesting. I didn't know
You told
about
me
it,
about it.
but
I've done it.
Nick's done it. Okay, so EMDR therapy, it's in a kind of an interesting way. It's almost like, best way to describe it is like actual clinical hypnosis in a way.
Yeah.
And essentially, you close your eyes. They put these two little buzzers in your hands that just kind of vibrate like an iPhone, and they just go left, right, left, right, left, right, and it does this thing called bilateral stimulation. And at a certain point, your eyes will start going left and right with the vibrations of these things, which is actually what your eyes do when you're in REM sleep. And so what it does is
Wow.
it puts you into this kind of subconscious level of thinking, but you're still awake, but you're kind of conscious, you know, physical brain that thinks about what you're doing and seeing, and all of that is kind of muted.
Is someone speaking to you?
Yes. And
Okay.
so you're doing therapy while you're in this sort of subconscious state, almost dreamlike state.
Wow.
And we were diving into a memory. And what we did before we actually did our EMDR therapy was we kind of identified what felt like important memories in my life that felt maybe damaging or hurtful.
Hmm.
And the memory that I wanted to dive into is I thought I had some issues with my dad, maybe. That was my theory. And so we were diving into a specific memory I had with my dad regarding, I was about 16, right? And I went to Nashville actually for the first time with my dad. And I was making my first record, my first like 5-song EP with this producer here in town.
Hmm.
And I made these songs, and I was having the absolute time of my life. It was probably the most confident I had ever been, at that point in my life as a 16-year-old. I was in Nashville. I was making music. I
Yeah.
felt like I was living in purpose. I
Yeah.
felt excited. Like life was exhilarating. And my dad, on the way back, we were getting back in the car from the trip, and my dad said, "Hey, this producer told me that you came across to him as really cocky and really full of yourself. And he didn't really like your personality or, how you acted." And I remember that being so unbelievably hurtful to me, because from my perspective, what that felt like I was being told at the time, and this isn't true, I don't think, but it's how it felt. And, that's important, how you feel, especially when you're young like that. I felt like the message of that was, when you were at your happiest and you're most fulfilled and you're most excited in your whole life, it was hurting somebody else. And they didn't like it. And so I remember that being a pivotal moment for me, and tracing back that memory of being like, I kind of stopped being happy. Kind of put a cap on my happiness and my willingness to experience joy after that, because the message that I heard was, my joy hurts other people.
Wow.
And we had been diving into that, and I'd kind of realized, oh my gosh, I've been carrying that for 8 years now at the time. And so we're diving into that memory, and I think what I wanted to get out of that was like, I felt like maybe my dad could have stuck up for me more. And I felt like he didn't do enough to stick up for me in that moment. He should have taken my side a little bit more. And so I go into this whole experience thinking I have a problem with my dad, right? And I'm trying to get to the bottom of that with this therapy thing. And Brent, my therapist, goes silent at a certain point, and he says, "Just let me know when you want to talk again, and just tell me what you experience, what you think about over these next few minutes." And I'm immediately whisked away into like a full-blown vision.
Wow.
And it feels like full-on like a dream, but it's so real. And I'm in the desert, and I'm witnessing God and Jacob wrestling.
Yeah, you told me about that.
And I am so unbelievably mad at God for being so mean to Jacob. And I'm like, what did he do to you? Why are you making this harder on him? He's just trying his best. And I start intervening, and I start beating up God in this vision. And I'm punching God, and I'm punching him, and he's not fighting me back at all. And I realize at a certain point that it's not very fun to fight a God that's not fighting back. And I'm like, why won't you fight me? And I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm just livid, and I'm mad, and he's looking at me on the ground, and I'm bruising him up, and he's unfazed. And then immediately I'm whisked away into some other vision. And I'm sitting in what seems like this big island in outer space. And behind me is this big golden kingdom that looks like the Bible storybook, Sunday morning, Sunday school version of the kingdom of heaven. And there's the pearly gates and everything, and my legs are dangling over the edge of this island in space. And I look behind at this kingdom, and I notice that it's empty. There's nobody in there except for one guy that looks like white Jesus, And I walk up to white Jesus. I'm like, hello. And he gives me this very blank, like unemotional look. And he points to the gate, doesn't say anything, but just points to it, kind of to show me like, it's unlocked. You can come in if you want. And I kind of peek through the gate a little bit. And I'm like, I don't really want to come in. Like, that doesn't really look like where I was promised I was going to end up after all this. And he just kind of shrugs at me, and he's like, all right. He just walks away. And I'm troubled. I don't know what to do. And I go and I sit back on the edge, and my feet are dangling over the edge of this thing. And I look down, and I see all these dancing purple lights in this like infinite just abyss below me. And it's terrifying and awe-inspiring, and my heart is fluttering, and I'm like, what is that? And something in me is like, I think that might be the kingdom of heaven. And I sit there for a couple of minutes and ultimately decide, if I jump off of this thing, that's either the kingdom of heaven or that's the deep end, and I'm done for. But I think I need to jump. And I jumped. And then I kind of came back to my senses a little bit, and Brent and I talked things through. And what that moment, those two visions were for me, was I realized exactly what God was doing in my life. And it was showing me that all the problems that I thought I had with my life, with my dad, with the music industry, with all these things, I actually had a really fundamental problem with I didn't really like God, or at least who I thought he was. And I had him all wrong. And it made it clear to me in those visions. And I've spent the last 3 years since then trying to figure out, who do you say I am? And like, oh, I fundamentally misunderstood you. And whoever was, made to believe you are, I don't think that's who you are. And I need to go figure out who you actually are. And I've spent the last 3 years of my life doing that. And it's been, for me, what I would consider the actual part of my life where I've actually begun to know the Lord and who he really is. And it all came down to me just being honest with the Lord. That I was furious. And, letting go of my life. Realizing that my problems they're not this world. I'm the guy on the cross that's like, will you save me from what's going on? I'm depressed and I'm traumatized and I'm suffering. I was that guy. Like, why won't you save me? You're saying you're this guy. And then all of a sudden, I kind of switched paradigms, and I was the other guy. I was the guy on the middle cross who's like, oh, none of this is the problem. Me being on this cross right now is not the problem. The problem is I don't know you. And that's been the journey that I've been on for the last 3 years, and you've met me in the middle of all that. And I would say I'm still very much in that and still very much weeding through, who are you really? Are you just my genie in a bottle, or are you God? And that's where I've been.
Dude, that's freaking awesome, dude. I love that. I don't think I heard that full story of that vision and what that detailed, but that was really cool.
Yeah.
That's huge, man.
And I don't know, it's cool that we're talking about it now, and then next week we have Chad, and he was the catalyst for it.
Now that we got you on the pod,
yeah.
What advice would you give little Brooks?
Ooh. I think the advice that I would give little Brooks would be that the people that are pouring into you and giving you advice are worth listening to. And you should assume that if ever anybody's pouring advice into you or counsel, or, I guess counsel is the right word for it. If anybody's counseling you that's older than you, they're not saying it for no reason. And if whatever they're saying is hurting you, think about it more, because there's probably more to it than the hurt that you're experiencing from what you're hearing.
Yeah.
And you don't know it all, and that's not a problem. That's a good thing. It's actually better that you don't know it all. That's beautiful. And if the word of the Lord hurts you, again, assume that hurt might be a lie, and look deeper and keep seeking. Knock and the door will be opened.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm excited to talk to these people with you, man. And I'm excited to talk with Chad.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a good conversation. So cool, man. Well, we'll wrap that up then. Hey guys, if you liked that video, I think you'll really like this video right here. My floating finger. Make sure to check out this video, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure to do that as well. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Boys.
Boys.